My sister had always been the quiet and obedient one. Our parents often said they had no problems with her. Unlike me, loud, stubborn, always getting into trouble, she was the perfect daughter. She never argued, never demanded attention. She could sit for hours in her room with a book or headphones. From the outside, it seemed as if she had no secrets at all. But it was exactly this calmness, this silence, that became a mask behind which she hid something that turned our whole life upside down. At first, everything looked almost unnoticeable. She started wearing baggy clothes. Even in the heat, she would put on a hoodie or a long sweater. Mom laughed, saying it was just a new style. Dad joked she was ashamed of her figure. But I saw more. I noticed how she cried at night. She thought no one could hear her, turned on the music, hid under the blanket. But our walls were thin, and her muffled sobs cut through the silence. I tried to ask. She brushed me off. "I'm fine," she would say with a crooked, tense smile. But her eyes betrayed the truth. They were full of fear. One evening I heard her in the bathroom. The door was ajar, and her voice reached me. "You promised. You said you would leave her. I can't wait any longer." Her voice trembled. I froze. Leave her? Who else could it be but his wife? Thoughts spun in my head. I didn't want to believe it. But everything fit together too well. For several days I walked like in a fog. Then I finally dared. I went into her room. She was sitting on the bed, staring at her phone. I exhaled and asked, "Are you pregnant?" She turned pale as if all the blood drained from her face. A second, another, an endless pause, and then a small nod. I sat next to her, not knowing what to say. "Who is the father?" I whispered. She raised her tear-filled eyes and whispered back, "He is married. He has a family. But he promised to leave. I love him." Her words sounded like a sentence. I felt the walls close in. How could she get into this? We agreed to hide it from our parents. I swore not to betray her. But with every passing day, her belly grew. Hiding the truth became harder and harder. Mom began to notice her morning sickness. She asked questions. My sister laughed, waved it off, but her eyes betrayed her. And then one evening at dinner, Mom couldn't take it anymore. "Are you pregnant?" she asked directly. My sister burst into tears and admitted it. But she refused to name the father. Mom froze as if she had been struck. Dad jumped up and started shouting. "Who is it? Who did this to you?" His voice shook with anger. I was silent. Inside me everything was tearing apart. I knew more than they did, but I couldn't say it. In a small town, secrets don't last long. Someone saw her with him. Someone told Mom. And soon everything became clear. The father of the child was a married man. The scandal was terrible. Mom shouted, "What have you done? This is shameful. He will never leave his family for you." My sister cried and repeated, "I love him. This is my choice." From that day, our house stopped being a home. Mom cried at night. Dad stayed late at work or left to stay with relatives. My sister stubbornly stood her ground. I did everything right. This child is my life. Meanwhile, he kept feeding her promises. "Just wait a little longer. Everything will change. I will leave soon," he wrote. But weeks passed, and nothing changed. His messages became rarer. Sometimes he disappeared for days. I saw her sitting by the window with her phone in her hands. Waiting. Tears rolled down her face when he didn't reply. Sometimes she fell asleep clutching the phone to her chest, as if afraid to lose it. One day I met him myself. He clearly hadn't expected that conversation. I asked, "Do you even understand what you're doing?" "She believes you." He shrugged and coldly said, "I won't leave my family. Tell her not to wait." His calmness was worse than any shouting. At that moment I realized, he was just using her. But I couldn't tell her. She was too fragile. Her faith in him was the only thing keeping her afloat. And at home everything was collapsing. Mom begged her to come to her senses. Dad threatened to kick the man out by force if he ever appeared at our door. Relatives called. Some demanded she have an abortion. Others said to send her away, just to hide the shame. But she stood her ground. And with every passing day, it felt like this story hadn't even truly begun yet, and the worst was still ahead. After that dinner, silence settled over our house, but it was the kind of silence that presses on your chest and makes it hard to breathe. Mom avoided looking at my sister, Dad barely spoke at all, and when he did, it was in bursts of anger. The air at home became heavy, filled with tension and unspoken words. My sister, however, behaved as if nothing had happened. She continued to go to school, to meet him in secret, to come back late at night with red eyes. Whenever Mom tried to talk to her, she would close herself in her room, turning up the music. I could hear her pacing back and forth, restless, like she was waiting for something that never came. Mom tried everything. She begged, she yelled, she even threatened to kick her out if she didn't tell the truth. But my sister only repeated the same phrase, "It's my life. I made my choice." She clung to it like a shield. The neighbors started whispering. I could feel their looks when I walked down the street. Some said she was reckless, some said she had been seduced, others pitted her. In a small town, gossip spreads faster than fire. For our parents, it was unbearable. One evening, Dad slammed his fist on the table and shouted, "If he shows up here, I'll drag him out myself." His voice echoed through the house. My sister didn't answer. She just lowered her head and held her stomach, almost protectively. That simple gesture made Mom cry even harder. Meanwhile, he kept stringing her along. "Just wait, I'm sorting things out. My wife suspects nothing, but I can't leave too suddenly. Give me time," he wrote. She believed him. She showed me the messages, as if to prove that everything was fine, that the future was already decided. But I saw what she refused to see. His words were empty. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. He never left his wife. He never came to talk to our parents. He never even walked her home. All he gave her were late-night calls and promises. I wanted to tell her the truth. I wanted to scream, "He doesn't love you. He's just using you." But every time I looked at her, I couldn't. Her face lit up every time the phone buzzed. That fragile hope was all she had. To destroy it would be like killing her from the inside. Then something happened that made things even worse. One afternoon, Mom saw her getting out of his car near the park. She stood frozen, watching them. He didn't even notice. He kissed my sister quickly and drove off, leaving her standing there with a shy smile. Mom told Dad that night. The storm that broke out was terrifying. Dad shouted so loudly that even the neighbors could hear. He called her naive, foolish, blind. He demanded she end it immediately. My sister, shaking but defiant, screamed back, "I love him. You don't understand." That night she locked herself in her room and cried for hours. I sat outside her door, listening. I wanted to go in, but I knew she wouldn't let me. She was trapped in her own world, where only his voice mattered, only his promises gave her strength. And yet, cracks began to show. Sometimes she would stare at the phone for hours, waiting for a reply that never came. Sometimes she would whisper to herself, "Why is he not answering?" Her confidence was slowly turning into desperation. Mom noticed too. She tried to sit next to her and speak gently, "Honey, please, you deserve better. He will never leave his wife. You're ruining your life." But my sister would shake her head violently, covering her ears like a child who doesn't want to hear the truth. I felt torn apart. I wanted to protect her, but I was powerless. The man held her in his hands, and he didn't even care. And my parents, they were breaking too. I heard Dad say late at night, "She's destroying herself. And she's destroying us with her." At that moment, I realized our family would never be the same again. It was only a matter of time before his wife found out. Secrets like that can never last forever. One evening, my sister came home pale, trembling, clutching her bag so tightly her knuckles turned white. I asked what happened, but she only shook her head, locked herself in her room, and didn't come out for hours. Later I learned the truth. His wife had confronted her in the street. She had followed him, watched him, and finally saw them together. She stopped my sister, furious, shouting that she was nothing but a foolish girl trying to destroy a family. People gathered around. My sister stood frozen, humiliated, unable to say a word. That day changed everything. After that, the calls from him became even shorter. Sometimes he wouldn't answer at all. When he did, his voice was cold, rushed. "I can't talk now. Don't text me. I'll handle it." But nothing was being handled. He was simply retreating, step by step, leaving her alone. At home, things grew unbearable. Mom begged her to let go. Dad shouted that she had shamed them all. Relatives called every day, asking questions, giving advice, spreading judgment. My sister walked around like a shadow, clinging to her belly as if it was the only thing she had left. One night I couldn't stand it anymore. I cornered her and said, "He doesn't love you. He won't leave his wife. You're only destroying yourself." She looked at me with such pain in her eyes and whispered, "Don't say that. If I stop believing, I'll have nothing." That broke me. She wasn't just in love, she was trapped. Her whole identity now depended on this illusion. Without it, she would collapse. And then came the breaking point. His wife called our house. She demanded to speak with my mother. Her voice was sharp, angry, but also trembling with pain. She said, "Tell your daughter to stay away from my husband. She will not destroy my family. If she tries again, I will ruin her reputation in this town." Mom hung up in tears. Dad punched the wall so hard his knuckles bled. And my sister? She sat in her room with her phone, waiting for a message that never came. The days turned into weeks. Her belly was now obvious, there was no way to hide it. People on the street stared, whispered. Some pitied her, others judged her harshly. She tried to walk proudly, but I could see how every glance cut into her. Sometimes at night she would whisper to the baby, stroking her stomach, "He loves us. He just needs more time. He will come." Hearing those words made me want to scream. But I stayed silent. I didn't know if the truth would destroy her or finally set her free. Then one evening, he came to our house. It was the first and last time. He stood in the doorway, looking nervous, glancing around like a thief. Dad stepped forward, his fists clenched, but Mom held him back. My sister ran to him, her eyes glowing with desperate hope. They talked quietly in the hallway. I strained to hear but caught only fragments. "I can't do this anymore, she knows, my kids, you need to stop calling me." My sister's sobs grew louder. She begged, pleaded, tried to hold on to him. But he pulled away, shook his head, and walked out the door. That door closing sounded like a final sentence. She collapsed on the floor, clutching her belly, crying so loudly that it tore through the house. Mom knelt beside her, trying to comfort her, but my sister pushed her away, screaming, "You don't understand. He loves me." But deep inside, I think she finally knew. After he walked out that night, the house was filled with a silence so heavy it felt almost physical. My sister locked herself in her room for 2 days. She barely ate, barely spoke. Sometimes I could hear her crying softly, sometimes talking to herself. She still clung to her phone as if waiting for a miracle message. But it never came. Mom tried to reach her, sitting outside the door, speaking gently, "Honey, please, you're not alone. We can get through this together." But my sister would only whisper, "You don't understand. He promised. He loves me." The words sounded weaker now, as if even she didn't fully believe them anymore. Dad avoided her completely. His disappointment was so deep that he couldn't even look at her. Sometimes I caught him staring at her belly with a mix of anger and helplessness. Once I overheard him telling Mom she ruined her life. And for what? For a liar who won't even call her anymore. Mom cried silently, not knowing how to answer. Outside our home, things were no better. People in town gossiped openly now. When my sister went to the store, whispers followed her. Some women gave her pitying looks, others judgmental stares. A group of boys once shouted after her, "Where's your husband?" "Oh, right, you don't have one." She came home shaking, locked herself in her room again, and I heard her sobbing until she fell asleep. Her health began to suffer. The stress, the sleepless nights, the constant crying, it all took a toll. She became thinner, paler, though her belly kept growing. Mom wanted to take her to the doctor, but my sister resisted, afraid that everyone would know even more about her situation. "I don't need help," she insisted, though it was obvious she did. Despite everything, she still held on to hope. She whispered to her baby at night, "He will come back. He has to. We'll be a family." Sometimes I stood outside her door and listened. It broke my heart, because even in her dreams she was holding on to an illusion. But slowly, cracks began to appear in her faith. One evening she came to me, her eyes red, her face pale, and whispered, "Do you think you really love me?" It was the first time she asked such a question. I didn't know how to answer. I wanted to be honest, but I also wanted to protect her. I simply said, "I think you deserve someone who loves you fully." She nodded silently, tears streaming down her cheeks. As months passed, the reality could no longer be ignored. He didn't call. He didn't visit. He didn't even send a single message. The silence was louder than any rejection. My sister began to understand, but the understanding brought no relief. It only deepened her pain. Meanwhile, our parents struggled in their own ways. Mom tried to be supportive, though her heart was broken. Dad grew colder, more distant. Our family dinners turned into silent meals, everyone avoiding each other's eyes. The warmth that once filled our home was gone. One night, I found my sister sitting on the porch, staring at the stars. She was holding her belly, tears streaming down her face. She whispered, "I thought love was supposed to save me. But it destroyed everything." Her voice was so quiet, so full of sorrow, that I didn't know how to comfort her. I just sat beside her, and we stayed like that until dawn. It was the first time I saw her truly begin to let go of the fantasy. But letting go didn't bring peace, it only opened the door to fear. Fear of the future. Fear of raising a child alone. Fear of facing the world's judgment every single day. And I knew then, the hardest part was still ahead. The last months of her pregnancy passed in a blur of fear and silence. She rarely left the house anymore. When she did, it was usually late in the evening, walking slowly down empty streets, holding her belly as if shielding the child from the world's cruel eyes. The whispers in town had grown quieter, but only because everyone already knew. There was nothing left to discover, only to judge. Mom did everything she could to support her, cooking meals, buying baby clothes, preparing a small corner of the room for the child. Dad kept his distance, though sometimes I caught him secretly watching my sister, his expression torn between anger and sorrow. I think deep inside he still loved her, but he couldn't forgive what had happened. As her due date approached, my sister became more fragile, both physically and emotionally. Sometimes she held my hand and whispered, "What if I can't do this? What if I fail?" I always told her she would be fine, but in truth, I was just as scared as she was. Then came the night. She woke us all with her cries, doubled over in pain. Mom rushed to her, Dad stumbled out of his room, pale and panicked. We hurried her to the hospital, the silence broken only by her gasps and sobs. The hours that followed were some of the longest of my life. We waited in the cold hallway, listening to her cries behind the door. Mom prayed quietly, Dad paced back and forth, fists clenched, face pale. I sat there, numb, my heart beating so hard it hurt. Finally, the crying stopped. For a moment there was only silence, and then another cry, high-pitched and fragile. The cry of a newborn. My sister's child had entered the world. When we were allowed inside, I saw her lying in the hospital bed, exhausted, her face pale and tear-streaked. But in her arms, she held a tiny baby. She looked down at it with eyes full of something I hadn't seen in her for months: peace. Not happiness, not yet, but a quiet peace. She whispered to me when I came closer, "He didn't come. But I don't need him anymore. I have everything I need right here." She kissed the baby's forehead, and for the first time in a long time, she smiled. The man never showed up. Not at the hospital, not afterward. He disappeared from her life completely, as if he had never existed. His absence was painful, but it also freed her. There were no more empty promises, no more desperate waiting. Only reality. At home, things slowly began to change. Mom devoted herself to helping with the baby. Even Dad, though still distant, sometimes held the child in his arms when no one was watching. He never said it out loud, but I think the baby softened something inside him. My sister changed too. The fragile girl who once clung to illusions was gone. She was tired, yes, but stronger. Her love for her child gave her a new kind of strength, something unbreakable. One evening, as I watched her rocking the baby to sleep, she looked at me and said softly, "I thought love was him. But I was wrong. Love is this. This little life. And I'll never let it go." And in that moment, I realized that even though everything had been broken, something new had begun. Pain had taken so much from her, but it had also given her something she would never lose. A reason to live. The story didn't end with a fairy tale. It ended with reality, harsh, complicated, imperfect. But in that reality, there was hope. And sometimes, that's enough.